We're going to talk a little bit about the Flint Water Crisis, and boy, oh boy, that story goes on, doesn't it? What's happened, though, is this is something that seemed to get slow attention, and I suppose that had something to do with the tenor of the story overall. That is to say, the details of it and the gravity of it didn't really start to become evident for a while, but the problem had been going on for a while. And, well, part of the reason that we're going to talk with Lindsey Smith this half hour is something about which I'm passionate, and I think some of you are too, that has played into this whole story, and that is the work of journalists like Lindsey, okay? Who helped us understand just what's going on there. So years and years ago, this is a little background, I sat in a cubicle talking to radio stations around Michigan about what road conditions were like and what events were going on in their parts of the state. 2 cubicles away, Lindsey Smith sat there doing similar things for other stations. Years later, I'm here with you, and Lindsey is with Michigan Radio, and she and her team at Michigan Radio have been called upon by various media outlets across the country as this Flint story unfolded, because they've been doing a lot of the covering of this and putting forth a lot of the reporting that's helped us understand it. Lindsey, good morning.
Good morning, Richard.
Thank you for the time today.
Oh, my pleasure.
So let's talk how this got on your radar, first of all, that you started to look into this story.
Sure. So at Michigan Radio, we have a Flint reporter who's based, in the city, in town. And, when he obviously covered the city's emergency manager takeover and the efforts there to save money, broadly speaking. And as part of that, we saw this transition to move to this new water system that Genesee County is still currently building. And immediately when the water switch happened from Detroit, they used to buy water from Detroit and started getting it from the Flint River until the new system is built. Right away, people started bringing jugs of water to City Hall and complaining about it to the City Council, which was essentially powerless because of the emergency manager, and to the emergency manager himself. There was a few guys over the years and through the switch that handled this. So it was a couple different emergency managers that they complained to. And there was just a variety of issues that kept happening from the spring of 2014 and through about this time last year. That was the first time this time last year that I really did any reporting on it. I'm based in Grand Rapids, so I typically left that stuff to our Flint reporter.
Yeah.
But the story would not, it was just one thing after another. They had, we're talking a lot about lead right now, but it wasn't just about lead. I mean, over the years, they had a number of different water problems that were kind of related to the switch. And we realized that just having one person on these ongoing problems wasn't working. It wasn't enough. So we kind of drafted a couple other reporters in to help sort of figure out what was going on.
And you found out what was going on.
Well, yeah, I think the first time I really realized, we had heard some things about lead last spring, but the first time I think it really dawned on us as a newsroom, and certainly me as a reporter, that I realized that something was seriously wrong in Flint was in late June, early July, around 4th of July weekend. I got this memo that an EPA staffer had given a resident, and she had leaked it to the press. And that memo was really incredible. It talked about hazardous waste level amounts of lead in her drinking water. She turned out to be an outlier in some cases, but it was the memo indicated, this is from an EPA, federal government official, indicated that her house could sort of be this canary in a coal mine, that the problems that she was experiencing weren't just because the plumbing in her house, she had plastic plumbing in her house. There was new plumbing in her house, so that wasn't the problem. But he indicated that there could be some broader problems. And when I approached the state with this, the state said, nope, no broad problem, relax. It's not that we're testing for lead and we're not seeing any issues. So that was, that memo really was written so strongly, it really stood out in my mind as being like the first time that I thought, this could be serious if what this guy is saying is true.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Lindsey Smith, a radio reporter based in Grand Rapids, whose coverage, along with her team, of the Flint Water Crisis has brought attention from all over the place, and we'll talk about that coming up in just a minute on WBCK. WBCK, we're talking with radio reporter Lindsey Smith of Michigan Radio, whose Flint water coverage garnered a lot of attention across the country, in fact, and we'll talk about that. We'll also link you to a hour-long report that she did that really brings to you in depth the human element of this story that a lot of us in broadcasting aren't able to do in little snippet news reports, which is part of the reason why Lindsey and her team got such attention, because people outside were trying to figure out what was going on in Flint. As it was going on, like you said, you start to get the notion that this is a big story. That's what's happened nationally. It started to pick up, and you started getting phone calls about this from all over the place.
Yeah, definitely from all over the place. I think that, the county health department in late September issued an advisory essentially to not drink the water in Flint. And, that's for an entire city of almost 100,000 people. You would think that in and of itself was a big deal, and that did get some national attention here and there. But it didn't really pick up all that much until the last maybe month or so, few weeks. And I think, I don't know what exactly set it off, but it seemed like at some point, bigger media outlets decided, like, well, how long is Flint not going to be allowed to drink the water?
Right.
And, is that a bigger story in and of itself? The sort of response to this health problem, right? We talk about it as a water crisis, but if you're a resident living there, yes, it's a water problem, but you're more worried about your family,
mm-hmm.
and especially if you have small children, which have the highest risk from being exposed to lead. They're worried about their kids, and they're going, okay, so how long do I have to drink bottled water? How long do I have to do this filtered thing? And they weren't really getting clear answers. I still don't think we have a clear answer on how long it's going to take for the water to be safe again. So I think once the response, it took a long time to really ramp up the response. Then the national media really took hold of that, and it's cascaded from there.
Are you still following it day by day right now?
Yeah, I'm obviously here in Grand Rapids. That's where I'm based. That's my beat, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But because Flint has just sort of, demanded so much attention, especially in the last few weeks. There was a point where we put together this hour-long documentary. Well, that aired in mid-December. So I got a chance to kind of take a break from Flint and report on in my home here in Grand Rapids. But because of the response, especially in this last month with the state, Governor Snyder deploying the National Guard and state police, and then releasing his emails. The state of the state was largely about Flint. We've found that having one person cover all of these things that are happening on a sort of daily basis is not enough. So, there's been 3 or 4 of us within my news department that are just versed on the topic enough that we just keep helping, the coverage in Flint, because it's, like I said, it's not enough for one guy to handle, really.
Yeah. Do you get the sense today, and I ask this because most of the mainstream coverage is all about the politics of this. Do you get the sense today, though, that when you look at what's happening there, that Flint has a handle on this now and that the worst is over?
I would love to say that. I feel like we've certainly passed a turning point. I mean, in the beginning, it was just straight up denial. There was no problem. The people with the jugs of rusty water all throughout 2014 and much of the beginning of last year were crazy people. I mean, they were essentially looked at like, yeah, okay, there's rust in your water, but, like, get a grip, get a hold of yourself.
Wow.
And, I mean, that is literally, like, I know people who have been basically told that they are crazy people. So, in the city council, although they were powerless, voted this time last year, or maybe it was a couple months difference here, but they voted to try to do anything possible to go back to Detroit's water system. But the emergency manager said at the time, that's not possible. You don't have the money. Flint's broke. So even though it's like, so we got past denial, right? Everybody's admitting now that there's a problem and that there were mistakes made. But whether or not we're past the sort of when can we drink the water phase, I mean, I think really what's next is how long is this going to last more immediately? And then do we need to do some serious work underground? How bad were the pipes damaged because of the water that wasn't treated properly? And I don't think we know that yet. So it's hard to say how long it's going to take to resolve this, because I still don't think we have a complete grasp on what the damage was that was done.
We're talking with Lindsey Smith, who's a radio reporter based in Grand Rapids, and her coverage of the Flint Water Crisis really brought national attention and helped a lot of folks understand just what was going on there. We're back in just a moment. WBCK, Richard Piet with you, and Lindsey Smith, radio reporter in Grand Rapids, covering the Flint Water Crisis. I think some of what you alluded to there before the break, the notion that some people who were holding up jugs of dirty water were nuts, you just don't want to believe that that's happening, but it was. It's an incredible story.
Yeah, and those people really deserve a lot of credit. In my opinion, it was, it was them being really persistent about saying, no, for real, there's something wrong with this water. And when they were kind of called crazy people, they went and found, they called the federal government and got the federal government involved. And then the federal government ended up touching base with these people and connecting them to outside researchers, researchers at Virginia Tech that, now the state is hiring to make people feel like they can trust the results that the state is giving them on their water now to say that it's safe or not. That's what got the Hurley doctors, the doctors at Hurley Hospital involved at some point to say, look at the lead levels. And once they did that and figured out that there was a spike in lead poisoning in small children in the city of Flint, it was the residents that kept saying to the media, to everybody, to say, look, we're not crazy. This is a problem, and we won't stand by and just be rolled over. And it took a long, long time for people to take them seriously. But I think now, the citizens really, in my mind, are heroes, because if they wouldn't have kept speaking up, we would be we probably wouldn't even necessarily be aware of this being a big problem, because nobody would have, maybe looked into it the way that they did. And the reason is because we're going to this new system, which is being built, and it should finish construction this year. And so sort of within the state, there was this mentality in a way of, well, we're going to this new system, and once we get there, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because we'll get water again from Lake Huron. That's where the new system's going to draw it from instead of the river, and it'll be fine, and people will get over it. So I think without the residents really raising their voices, we might not even know such a thing as the Flint water crisis.
So being outstate from Flint, you get to look at this from angles that maybe some of us in Southwest Michigan are looking at it from as well. That is to say, Have you picked up any notion from this that we could have similar problems in other parts of the state?
Yeah, I definitely was interested in that. I mean, I certainly, once I started really reporting on the story, I live in Grand Rapids, which I think of as typically a pretty well-run city that's, we don't have any, certainly we have our budget problems like any other city, but you don't think of it as a city that's in danger of getting an emergency manager, right? It's got their stuff together. So I got my water tested personally just to see. I found out if I have a lead service line or a copper service line, just to know. I have a 1-year-old, so like I said, this is like kind of a health issue. I had concerns of giving my kid formula with water that potentially is laced with lead. I had to have that peace of mind. But I think there were some factors in Flint that you wouldn't necessarily see in other places. I think the main thing is, yes, older cities do still have lead pipes in some areas. And, yeah, you should probably figure out, do you have a lead service line, just so you know. And cities, need to invest in sort of replacing and maintaining this old infrastructure to make sure that they keep the public safe. But it can be done. There are, across the country, it's estimated that there's 10 million lead service lines in plenty of older cities that have water that, if it's treated properly, can run through these old pipes because they're coated with this chemical coating that keeps your tap water generally safe.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what happened in Flint, and there's a series of decisions that were probably not very well-informed decisions that were made that led to that. But I think it's one of those things where I definitely tell people I'd test my water. I'd figure out if I had a lead service line just to know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all the work you and your team there have done. And, as a person who's worked in this business a while now and is also a media teacher, I can tell you that the work that Lindsey and her team have done is work that is not done widely anymore. That is to say, big companies have taken out of the budget the kind of work that they're doing and that helped people understand and begin to correct this Flint water problem.